Power the Disability Vote, a campaign by Rev Up, www.revuptexas.org. Episode 2, Nancy Crowther and Renee Lopez.
Ready?
Mm-hmm. My name is Renee Lopez, and I am a 62-year-old Mexican-American woman, and I use a wheelchair to get around. I have gray hair, and I'm wearing a headband that has flamingos on it.
I'm Nancy Crowther. I am a 66-year-old female Caucasian with bright gray hair and a aqua blue t-shirt on. I use a wheelchair for my mobility and for the accessibility I need to get around.
Tell us about your journey both as friends and advocates.
Nancy and I met back in 1981. What was that, 300 years ago?
Yeah.
And we met at UT. We were living in the same dorm.
I happened to be Renee's big buddy. We had a big buddy program at Disabled Student Services at UT, and of course I was there being a cheerleader for disability rights.
We needed automatic doors, we needed ramps, we needed accessible classrooms. So yeah, that had us pretty busy.
We named it Pi Alpha Beta, People Against Barriers. We wrote down all the barriers that we could find, took them to the right offices. That's where I started to see where advocacy could work. That moved me into the transportation information. I was a plaintiff in the Ferris et al. Versus University of Texas. UT, under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, was responsible to have accessibility programs and services for people with disabilities. The campus receives federal funds. What was the matter with UT? Their shuttle buses were not accessible.
We had to get to our classes, because we didn't have transportation.
The lawsuit against the University of Texas was David and Goliath. I mean, they wore suits. We were riding up and down in freight elevators to get to the courthouse. It was just a nasty time. And it showed who had the power and who didn't. Upon graduation, I got involved too with some friends who wanted to start a group called Adaptive Texas for accessible transportation. Oh my God, a dream come true. Because we voted on Capital Metro,
Yeah.
it's turning 35, 40 this year, something like that. It's all accessible. That vote changed the lives of thousands of people, which leads me to another story, but I will continue. 20 years later.
Tell me when you're halfway through.
Why do you vote? How has Texas voting changed over the years?
We got involved with Rev Up because we both believe in the power of the vote. My family voted. My mother was a voter. Now, they were predominantly Hispanic, and they were Mexican, they couldn't vote. So voting was not a big deal in my family. And my father was one of those people who used to say, why vote? They don't listen to us anyway. They're going to do what they want to do. He had that kind of attitude. And but I just felt like if I have the opportunity to vote and to express my ideas and to have a voice and a say into what happens in our country, then I'm going to do it. I've been voting since I was 18. This was back in the days where, write your name on a paper, and then they gave you the ballot, and then you had to punch a hole in it. But somehow I managed to do that. But I remember thinking, I wonder if other people can do that. I mean, I have trouble using my hands, but there were many other people who would have trouble using their hands to pushed down on that. I didn't know what the alternative was to that because I hadn't really gotten involved in advocacy yet. It's gotten more difficult, actually, believe it or not. I went to vote back in 2020, I believe, and it was the touch screen. Well, I can't reach up to touch the screen, and I was thinking, well, how am I going to do this? And I finally just had to stand up from my wheelchair so that I could reach the screen and touched it, in order to vote. And I didn't find out till later that there was actually an accommodation because the clerks that were working there didn't know about it. And I could have stayed in my chair and used that little box to manipulate the ballot. And so I went through a big struggle with that. It's just things like that I don't think people think about. I want people to know that, yes, it's difficult and you may run into some problems, but God, do it anyway, because your voice is very, very important. Your vote is very, very important.
Every energy you put into voting does count. There are a lot of naysayers out there say, why bother? They're going to do what they want to do. Someone especially in the disabled community who has never voted before, unless you got a buddy that can go with you to vote, it's kind of scary and intimidating. I don't know, I hear, violins and harps playing right now because it's such an honor and a privilege. And you see the outcomes. Even if it doesn't go the way you thought it might, at least you put forth the effort.
What issues are important to you to vote on?
The $1 million question. One thing I like about Rev Up that I like very much is when we have our candidates forum. They send in questionnaires to the candidates regarding disability issues, and we get to read over them to find out what do you plan to do about this problem, and so I think that's very important too. It gives us an idea of what that candidate is thinking. It's already difficult, and is the candidate that we choose going to make things better for us or not?
We have our rights through the ADA that was signed into law in 1990. It was a day of freedom.
What scares me about the future is, yes, we have ADA. Yes, it was signed. Yes, it's liberty and justice for all. But is it going to stay there? I don't want someone coming and saying, let's overturn that. They don't need those rights. Nothing is set in stone like we think it is. So you better really think hard about who you want in office.
You got to look at the transportation. We're trying to get light rail involved in Austin. Should it ever happen in my lifetime, attendant services. We're saving the state money by being in our own homes than being in institutions. It's so much more realistic to be in your own home. That can be taken away. Housing is one of the very worst problems right now for people with disabilities. Without accessible housing, without access, without all these rights that we have as Americans, we're nothing. So, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight to the bitter end, focus in on what will benefit the biggest and broadest group of people with disabilities here in Austin, in Texas, and in the nation.
I am Renee Lopez.
And I'm Nancy Crowther.
And we're here to power the disability vote.
Thanks, Nancy and Renee. Tune in for more of the Power the Disability Vote podcast series. Power the Disability Vote. Rev Up. www.revuptexas.org.